The streets across the entire nation of Iran have devolved into an absolute combat zone, resembling a battlefield more than a functioning society. We are currently witnessing the regime slaughtering its own citizens at a terrifying pace, a velocity of violence that is truly unprecedented in modern history. Yet even in the face of live ammunition, sweeping mass arrests, and a staggering death toll that is now estimated to be upwards of 12,000 innocent lives, this revolution shows zero signs of slowing down. While the regime enforces a draconian, total internet blackout to cloak the actions of their hit squads in darkness, the international community is finally opening its eyes to the horror. Prominent global figures and world leaders, including high-ranking officials like the German Chancellor, are no longer staying silent and are now openly predicting the inevitable collapse of the Ayatollah's iron-fisted rule. President Trump has declared that assistance is inbound, and we are seeing a significant escalation as United States fighter jets ramp up operations at air bases strategically located throughout the Middle East. We begin tonight's coverage with one of the most harrowing reports to emerge from this uprising. According to a fresh assessment grounded in leaked medical data that is being smuggled out of Iran, we have confirmation that at least 12,000 people have been murdered, marking this as the single deadliest massacre in the nation's entire history. The vast majority of these executions took place under the cover of darkness on the nights of January 8th and January 9th, 2026, coinciding exactly with the initial internet shutdown. This blackout was a calculated move by the Iranian regime to conceal their crimes from global view, but the truth is leaking out thanks to the courageous Iranian doctors refusing to be silenced. These medical professionals are putting their own lives on the line to speak directly with the foreign press, knowing full well the consequences. Could you elaborate on the critical findings revealed in this testimony and break down exactly what the doctor on the ground shared with you regarding the situation? You mentioned that the physician you interviewed explicitly stated that live ammunition and military-grade weaponry were being deployed directly against unarmed civilian populations. That is absolutely correct. The key takeaways here are chilling as he reports that on Thursday night, right around 10 o'clock in the evening, a massive wave of wounded citizens began flooding into the facility. Remember, this source isn't just an observer. This is a surgeon standing right there in the operating theater, desperately trying to save lives as the casualties roll in. He describes an immediate and terrifying shift in the pathology of the trauma they were treating as the night progressed. What started as typical riot control injuries from rubber bullets, pellets, or birdshot rapidly escalated into catastrophic wounds caused by machine gun fire injuries you would only expect to see in a full-scale war. According to his account, every single hospital in the vicinity was completely pushed past the breaking point, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of victims. They simply did not have the medical personnel or resources required to handle the influx of the dead and the dying arriving at their doors. The second critical point he highlighted was a distinct tactical transition occurring around midnight on Thursday, where regular police forces were seemingly ordered to stand down and pull back. In their place, the hardline Revolutionary Guards armed to the teeth with military-grade hardware along with the brutal Basij militia moved in to take control of the front lines. Their mission was to assault the populace directly, and the doctor was absolutely horrified by the indiscriminate nature of the carnage and the severity of the wounds inflicted. In fact, the death toll has climbed so high that even the Islamic regime has been backed into a corner, forced to admit on their own state-run television channels that Iranian citizens are losing their lives. Even by their own conservative and likely suppressed estimates, they are acknowledging that 2,000 people have been killed up to this point. And let's be clear about who these victims are. The vast majority are everyday, ordinary Iranian citizens. Now, obviously, there is significant debate regarding the precise casualty count because the ongoing internet blackout is severely throttling the flow of verifiable information. But ask yourself this: if a regime known for secrecy is willing to admit to 2,000 deaths, one can only imagine how horrifying the true reality on the ground actually is. Furthermore, we have received intelligence indicating that Supreme Leader Khamenei himself authorized this massacre, with leaks coming directly from Iran's Supreme National Security Council. Sources within the presidential office confirm that these more than 2,000 executions were carried out following a direct directive issued by Khamenei. All three branches of the government were not only aware of this operation, but approved it, and there is a documented chain of command proving this collusion. This means that when the time comes for an indictment at the International Criminal Court regarding these ongoing war crimes, we already possess the documentary evidence needed to pinpoint exactly who is responsible. And the only reason we are privy to this damning information is that a brave insider within the government apparatus is leaking these documents to the outside world. This is a clear and undeniable signal of high-level defection, And the motivation behind this betrayal of the regime is incredibly simple. The Iranian regime is venturing down a very dark path to maintain its grip on control, with the Ayatollah deploying death squads to ensure his throne remains secure at any cost. We are seeing roving bands of 8 to 10 members of the Basij and Revolutionary Guard deployed to the streets with explicit direct orders to shoot on sight and shoot to kill. It is precisely because of these lethal directives that we are seeing the death toll skyrocket to horrifying numbers like 12,000 victims. To put that in perspective, this figure is actually significantly higher than the estimated casualties from the infamous Tiananmen Square massacre that took place back in 1989. This crackdown has officially evolved into the single largest state-sponsored slaughter that has ever occurred in the recorded history of Iran. Yet despite the brutal crackdown and the digital blackout meant to silence them, the protesters remain defiant and refuse to be quieted. In a desperate attempt to regain the narrative, the regime has organized its own counter-protest summoning loyalists to stage a public rally. The sole purpose of this gathering was to manufacture propaganda footage that they could broadcast on state television to project an image of stability. Their goal is to demoralize the opposition and convince the freedom fighters that taking to the streets is futile, and certainly not worth risking their lives for. Just take a look at this footage we have obtained. There you see him smiling broadly and waving with his hand over his heart Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian, marching alongside the staged crowd as if nothing is wrong. While the regime's propaganda machine is desperately urging citizens to march in support of the state, leaked video evidence paints a horrific counter-narrative, exposing the bodies of dissidents stacked in cold storage facilities. The audio captures the gut-wrenching screams of a relative just out of the frame, a raw, unfiltered sound of agony that cuts through the silence and tells you everything you need to know about the human cost. As the government-enforced total internet blackout drags into its fifth agonizing day, unauthorized footage of what the Iranian authorities are trying to hide is slowly and dangerously trickling out to the rest of the world. These clips are far too graphic and volatile for families to share without censorship, yet they serve as undeniable proof of the crackdown's brutality. They reveal a nightmare scenario where families are forced to hunt for their missing loved ones among piles of the dead, with so many body bags accumulating that the overflow is being left out on the concrete. I have to say, looking at this footage, it stands as one of the most heartbreaking and harrowing scenes I have witnessed in all my years covering international conflict. It is nearly impossible to comprehend the sheer psychological trauma these families are enduring as they are forced to navigate these makeshift morgues just to find their children. They are walking past rows of corpses simply laid out on the floor, checking face after face in a terrifying lottery, praying that the next bag they unzip does not contain a brother, a sister, or a parent. It is absolute madness. This tragedy explains precisely why, during the funerals held for protesters slain by security forces, the mourning crowds are boldly breaking into chants calling for the immediate overthrow of Supreme Leader Khamenei. And that rising tide of public anger is exactly the reason why the Iranian government has taken the unprecedented step of issuing new decrees. They are now effectively banning public funerals for anyone killed during this revolution, to prevent these gatherings from turning into massive anti-government rallies. Just take a moment to let that sink in. This entire situation signals one undeniable fact: if the regime has to resort to hiding bodies and outlawing grief, it is doing so solely because it is terrified of losing its grip on power. We know that the clock is ticking for the leadership in Tehran, and this isn't just an editorial opinion coming from this news desk. We have just witnessed German Chancellor Friedrich Merz make a historic declaration, becoming the first major world leader to publicly predict the imminent collapse of the Ayatollah and his entire administration. Now his bold assertions could very well be founded on high-level classified intelligence reports that are currently crossing his desk in Berlin. Or perhaps he is analyzing the same open-source data and citizen journalism that has been flooding social media channels despite the blockades. It is crucial that we pay attention to these diplomatic shifts. So if you want to stay ahead of these rapidly developing geopolitical stories, make sure you are locked in for our continued coverage. Let's go directly to the soundbite and hear exactly what the German Chancellor had to say regarding this crisis. He expressed deep alarm regarding the reports of escalating brutality by the police and the so-called Revolutionary Guard in Iran against their own civilian population. I am taking this opportunity to once again issue a stern demand to the mullah's regime to immediately cease this campaign of violence against the people. History shows us that if a government can only maintain its authority through the use of brute force and terror, then that government is in fact finished. It is my assessment that we are likely witnessing the final days and weeks of this administration, the beginning of the end for this regime. And we are not just talking about the physical violence happening in the streets and public squares. Iranian security forces have also detained thousands of demonstrators since the revolution began, and the Ayatollah has officially labeled these protesters as enemies of God. That specific legal designation is terrifying because it means they are stripped of due process and the right to a trial, sending them on a direct path to death row. Reports indicate that a wave of mass executions is scheduled to commence on January 14, 2026, a horrific violation of the universal human right to protest government actions. The situation has become so dire that even the United Nations is breaking diplomatic protocol to forcefully condemn these planned actions. Listen to this. A spokesperson for the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights stated today that the organization is absolutely appalled by the situation. Their horror stems not only from the violence committed by security forces against unarmed protesters, but also by the credible reports that these detainees will soon face state-sanctioned execution. It is also extremely concerning to see public declarations from certain judiciary officials in Tehran. These officials are indicating that the death penalty will be utilized against protesters through expedited judicial processes that lack any semblance of fairness. The High Commissioner emphasizes that the Iranian people possess the fundamental right to assemble and demonstrate peacefully without fear of retribution. Their legitimate grievances need to be heard and addressed through dialogue rather than instrumentalized by political actors or crushed by the state. This is where we need to shift our focus to Washington and analyze the aggressive countermeasures that the United States has already initiated. As many of you are aware, President Trump has repeatedly vowed that if Iran proceeds with killing protesters, there would be severe and immediate consequences. And based on the evidentiary footage and reports we are receiving, the death toll has reached an unprecedented level that demands a response. Consequently, yesterday we saw President Trump take to social media to announce a major policy shift stating the following. Effective immediately, any nation that continues to conduct commerce with the Islamic Republic of Iran will be hit with a massive tariff of 25%. This levy applies to any trade deal conducted with the United States of America, and the executive order is final and conclusive. There are two major takeaways here. First of all, this is significant news because it applies maximum pressure exactly where the regime is most vulnerable. This move is designed to directly cripple the Iranian economy, which is already spiraling into a catastrophe due to internal mismanagement and unrest. Iran is currently the second most sanctioned nation on the planet, trailing only Russia. But these new secondary tariffs go far beyond standard sanctions. They target third-party nations that are still willing to facilitate trade with Tehran. And that puts a massive target on China, which is by far Iran's largest economic lifeline. The Chinese market currently imports roughly $22 billion worth of Iranian goods annually, with the vast majority of that being illicit Iranian oil. Of course, we cannot overlook the other major players on the international stage, including key strategic trade partners such as Turkey, India, Germany, South Korea, and Japan, who are all watching these developments closely. With this bombshell announcement now public, the world is holding its breath to see exactly which sectors of this global trade network will take a hit and see a significant reduction in volume. This brings us directly to our second critical point of analysis because, as we all know, signing a piece of legislation or announcing a new policy is the easy part. Strictly enforcing those measures on the ground is an entirely different beast. President Trump has laid down the gauntlet with a sweeping 25% tariff proposal. But the real question remains which nations will actually end up paying that steep 25% penalty when the dust settles. As you might expect, Beijing has already come out swinging, signaling their absolute displeasure, to put it mildly, regarding these latest economic tariffs unveiled by the Trump administration. It is absolutely crucial that we pause for a moment to highlight the glaring hypocrisy currently on display in the international diplomatic arena. Notice how there is total radio silence from the Chinese Communist Party regarding the brutal crackdown and killing of peaceful protesters in Iran. Honestly, it aligns perfectly with their track record. The bottom line is that the Chinese Communist Party is far more concerned with securing their crude oil supply chains than they are with the lives of innocent Iranian citizens dying in the streets. However, the United States of America is not resting on its laurels, and the administration's response has certainly not stopped at mere economic sanctions. Back on Tuesday, President Donald Trump was scheduled to convene a high-stakes meeting with his top military commanders and cabinet members to be briefed on every single strategic option currently on the table. The consensus is that the United States effectively needs to intervene within Iran, primarily to provide crucial support and cover for the protesters fighting for their freedom. I have to assume that strategic briefing has concluded because shortly after the scheduled time on Tuesday, the president took to social media and tweeted this direct message: "Iranian patriots, do not stop your protest." He continued by urging them to seize control of their government institutions and to document the identities of every assassin and abuser, promising that those regime enforcers will pay a heavy price. The statement went on to say, "I have officially canceled all diplomatic meetings with Iranian officials until the senseless slaughter of protesters ceases immediately. Hang in there because help is on the way right now." Now we are still left in the dark regarding exactly what that promise entails or how the United States of America intends to operationally insert itself into this volatile situation. But one fact is undeniable. United States Air Force fighter jets have been clocking significantly more flight hours and showing much higher activity levels than usual across the Middle East theater. As many of you are well aware, the United States of America maintains a massive entrenched military footprint with numerous bases scattered throughout the Middle East region. This surge in activity could signal imminent targeted military airstrikes, or it could be a diversion for something completely different. We will just have to wait and see, as only time will reveal the true strategy. However, analysts have broken down the playbook, and here are the specific tactical options that the United States of America could possibly deploy in this scenario. Take a look. First, the president has a full suite of non-kinetic warfare options at his disposal, ranging from overt political backing to sophisticated cyber attacks aimed at crippling the command structures of the IRGC. The goal would be to degrade the operational effectiveness of Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the Basij, which function as a brutal paramilitary secret police force known for terrorizing the population. Beyond disrupting the regime's enforcers, there are significant diplomatic moves they can make locally to help establish a viable political platform for the opposition. There is already talk of a transition council being formed, featuring prominent figures like Nobel Peace Prize laureate Shireen Ebadi, who are ready to step up and lead during this crisis. Essentially, Washington is working to showcase credible leaders who can represent a legitimate democratic alternative to the current hardline regime. All of these strategies make perfect sense from a geopolitical and diplomatic perspective, offering a path forward without immediate bloodshed. However, President Trump continues to use increasingly aggressive rhetoric, strongly implying that he is ready to pull the trigger on a range of kinetic military options. And let's be honest, in theory, he absolutely has the capacity to strike. The Americans have established military bases in virtually every single country across the Middle East, along with extensive airfields. The two primary hubs for air operations are located at Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, situated just outside the capital city of Doha. Additionally, there is the massive Al Dhafra Air Base located in the United Arab Emirates, which serves as another critical launch point. Both of these installations house massive air squadrons equipped with state-of-the-art fighters and bombers that can be scrambled at a moment's notice. If for some reason host nation sensitivities prevent the use of those local bases, the Pentagon can always pivot operations to Ramstein Air Base in Germany. Furthermore, although it is a considerable distance away, the RAF base at Akrotiri in Cyprus could logically play a strategic role in any operation, even though no official sources have confirmed it yet. As you know, this revolution is fluid and still unfolding, and we are committed to ensuring you stay updated the second we receive any new intelligence reports. So make sure you hit that subscribe button right down below so you do not miss any breaking updates on this developing story.